There's a reason ancient warriors didn't flinch when death was staring them in the face. It's not that they didn't feel fear, it's that they accepted it. Think about the samurai or a stoic like Marcus Aurelius. You might think they were wired differently, like they were superhuman somehow. But the truth? They just stopped running. They stopped fighting against the way life works. And when they surrendered that resistance, they stepped into a kind of power most people never touch. Real power doesn't come from gaining more control over life. It begins the moment you realize you don't need control at all. Most people live in constant negotiation with life, arguing with the past, replaying moments that hurt them, obsessing over why someone betrayed them or why something didn't go their way. But here's the wild part. It's not the event itself that breaks them. It's their refusal to accept that it happened. The mental loop, the resistance. That's what causes suffering. Acceptance doesn't mean approval. It doesn't mean passivity. It means you finally stop draining your energy into something that already happened and can't be rewritten. Because here's the truth. Life isn't fair. It doesn't operate by your expectations. The second you truly get that, when you stop expecting life to match some fantasy you built in your head, you feel something strange. Peace. When you stop being dragged around by should have and why me, something powerful happens in the silence that follows. You become grounded. You stop shaking even when everything around you is falling apart. You stop needing the world to go your way in order to feel okay. Most people think freedom means doing whatever you want. But the real version of freedom? It's needing nothing to be different. It's when you stop begging the present moment to be something else. That's when you stop being a prisoner of your emotions. Think back. How many times have you spiraled, not because of what actually happened, but because you couldn't accept that it was happening? A breakup, a betrayal, a failure. Those moments didn't destroy you, the resistance did. The "this can't be happening to me" fight in your mind is what tore you apart. But if you can sit with what is, even when it hurts, even when it's messy, and just breathe through it without trying to edit or judge it, life loses its grip on you. The pain doesn't own you anymore. Acceptance doesn't make you passive. It makes you present. It's not about loving your pain. It's about refusing to turn it into a villain. When you stop labeling every tough moment as a problem, it stops running your life. Here's what most people miss. The instant you accept reality, your mind goes quiet. That quiet, that's not giving up. That's you reclaiming your peace. That's when the fear, the disappointment, the heartbreak, they're just there, and they don't define you anymore. Once you stop resisting your own story, the mistakes, the regrets, the scars, you stop feeling ashamed of it. You stop trying to explain yourself to people who don't even matter. You stand up, fully human, and say, "Yeah, I lived that." And suddenly nobody can use your past against you. You've already made peace with it. And something strange happens when you do that. When you stop trying to fix everything and just accept it, life starts to flow. You stop fighting uphill battles. You start realizing that half the weight you were carrying wasn't from the events themselves, but from the stories you wrapped around them. Stories like, "This shouldn't have happened," or "I should be further by now," or "They never should have treated me that way." But those stories, they're just megaphones for pain. They make the hurt louder. They keep you stuck in what could have been, instead of allowing you to face what is. When you finally accept it all, the mess, the unfairness, the unanswered questions, you take your power back. You stop waiting for apologies that might never come. You stop tying your peace to someone else's recognition. You become whole without needing closure. That doesn't mean you stop caring. It just means you care differently. You stop looking for external validation. You stop trying to rewrite the past. And most importantly, you stop trying to rescue people who never wanted to be saved. You take all that energy you were spending on people and stories that drained you, and you reinvest it into healing, into growth, into becoming someone who doesn't need chaos just to feel something. Because here's the deeper truth. Control is an illusion. The tighter you try to grip it, the more things slip through your hands. Real strength is in the letting go, in the stillness, in the choice to not chase the noise anymore. The more you start to accept, really accept, the rejections, the endings, the things that didn't go your way, you see something. Life wasn't punishing you, it was redirecting you, away from things that were never meant for you, away from roles and relationships you outgrew, away from illusions you were never meant to carry. You become less reactive. Someone says something cruel, it doesn't stick. A plan falls apart, you breathe. A door closes, you don't panic. You start to see that all the chaos was just life rearranging things, not against you, but for you. Somewhere along the way, we were taught to fear surrender, like letting go meant failure, like acceptance meant you gave up. But it's the opposite. Acceptance is the moment you stop bleeding for things that are already gone. It's the moment you stop arguing with memories. You don't need to fix the past. You just need to stop living there. Most people don't fear hardship, they fear stillness. They're terrified of sitting alone with themselves. That's why they keep running, distracting, numbing. But when you can sit with all of it, not just the polished parts, but the raw, uncomfortable truths, you stop splitting yourself in two. You stop pretending you're fine when you're not. You stop editing yourself just to be accepted. And that's when something wild happens. You start making decisions from peace, not pressure. You're not chasing love just to feel worthy. You're not chasing success just to feel valuable. You're not chasing anything because you're rooted. And rooted people, they're dangerous. Dangerous to a system that profits off your fear. They can't be sold false urgency. They can't be manipulated by shiny distractions because they're not looking outside for something they've already found inside. This is what the world fears most, someone who's not desperate, someone who doesn't beg for attention or chase after explanations, someone who walks away quietly when something no longer feels aligned. We've been conditioned to perform, to explain, to justify our presence. But the truth is, you're not here to audition for anyone's approval. You're not a background character in someone else's story. You're the author of your own. And once that clicks, you become unshakable. Not because life suddenly gets easier, but because you stopped expecting it to. You stop collapsing every time the wind blows. You stop needing the world to validate your truth. You've made peace with chaos. You've accepted that discomfort is part of the process, and you're still okay. Let's talk about something deeper, control. We live in a world obsessed with it. Control over timing, control over outcomes, control over people. And most of us walk around with this quiet tension in our chest, like we're constantly bracing for something. Because deep down, we're terrified of uncertainty. We want life to follow our script. We want relationships to be predictable. We want guarantees. But life doesn't care about your script. It's not an equation. It's a wave. And the more you try to grip that wave, the more you get dragged. Real peace doesn't come from managing every detail. It comes from releasing the illusion that you even could. Look around. How many people do you know who are completely exhausted? Not because they're doing too much, but because they're resisting what already is. Holding on to relationships that expired years ago. Clinging to old versions of themselves out of fear of who they might become. Carrying grudges like they're trophies. That's not living. That's surviving. That's bracing. But when you start accepting things without labeling them as good or bad, you move differently. You stop reacting from fear and start responding with clarity. You stop panicking. You detach. Now, detachment doesn't mean coldness. It doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you mature. You realize your peace is too expensive to keep handing over to people who don't even know what to do with it. You stop asking, why did they do that to me? And start asking, why did I keep letting it happen? That shift, that's the beginning of freedom. Acceptance is what happens when you outgrow the chaos you once called normal. It's not dramatic. It's quiet. It's the silent decision to stop begging people to see your worth. It's understanding that some people will misunderstand you, no matter how perfectly you explain yourself. And that's okay because their perception isn't your responsibility. Your alignment is. The more you let go, the lighter you move. The less you explain, the more powerful your presence becomes. People feel it when you're not chasing them anymore, when you're not trying to prove anything. That's when they start paying attention, not because you demanded it, but because you stopped needing it. That's the power of being rooted. Rooted people don't need to shout. They don't need to over-justify. They don't even need to be understood. Their calm speaks louder than their words. And here's what's wild. The moment you stop over-explaining yourself, the world starts to shift around you. Not because the world changed, but because you did. Most people are out here trying to fix a version of themselves that was never broken. They were just trained to betray their own voice in order to keep the peace. Let me say that again. You're not broken. You were just taught to abandon yourself. You were taught that being a good person means overextending, over-justifying, over-explaining to people who were never really listening. But that guilt you feel when you say no, that silence you carry, that's not your conscience. That's conditioning. You were trained to feel bad for protecting your energy, but it's not your job to make others comfortable with your truth. Your only job is to live it. And when you fully accept that, everything shifts. You stop reacting. You stop getting dragged into conversations that are just traps. You stop defending decisions that were never up for debate. Your energy becomes a filter. The right people feel it. They understand it without explanation. And the wrong people? They slowly fall away without you lifting a finger. Not because you push them, but because you stop performing. You no longer rehearse every conversation in your head. You stop fearing misunderstandings. You realize, if someone can't respect your silence, they were never truly hearing your words either. That's when real freedom begins. When your presence, not your explanations, does all the speaking. There's a kind of power in silence that people don't talk about enough. Not the passive avoidant kind, but the grounded kind. The kind that's rooted in clarity, in conviction, in truth. Silence isn't the absence of noise. It's the presence of understanding. When you stop over-explaining, you start realizing just how much of your life was spent trying to be digestible to people who never even wanted to taste your truth in the first place. People who weren't trying to understand you, they were trying to manage you, trying to shape you into something they could handle, something that made them comfortable. So your silence becomes unsettling, not because you're hiding something, but because you're finally protecting something, your energy, your vision, your peace. And that shakes people, especially the ones who fed off your confusion, the ones who relied on your need for approval. But the ones who are meant for you, they don't need all the noise. They don't demand emotional performances. They don't make you prove your worth. They just get it. And when you operate from that space, where you're not trying to convince or perform, you start walking differently. You speak less, but everything you say hits deeper. You react less, but your presence says more. You're not scared of being misunderstood anymore. You're not chasing validation. You're standing in your own truth, not in the echo of someone else's. And here's the wild part. The more rooted you get in that calm, quiet stillness, the more magnetic you become. Not because you're being flashy, not because you're louder, but because your energy feels unshakable. People can't put their finger on what changed, but they feel it. They sense that they can't shake you anymore, that nothing they say can pull you out of alignment. You've made peace with your story, the past, the silence, the way certain people will never get you, and that's okay. You're not fighting yourself anymore. You're not fighting the world. You've stopped trying to fix how people see you. You've stopped twisting yourself just to fit places you were never meant to be. And that's when the real peace comes in. You stop chasing clarity from people who live in confusion. You stop shrinking your truth to make it easier for others to digest. You stop explaining yourself to people who only listen to reply, not to understand. And instead, you begin to live, fully, freely, quietly. You start moving to your own rhythm. You walk away without drama. You speak less, but when you do, your words carry weight. You feel everything, but you're no longer controlled by anything. The world keeps spinning, people keep talking, chaos keeps knocking. And you keep choosing your peace. Not because everything outside is calm, but because everything inside finally is. Once you've accepted it all, the love, the loss, the rejection, the silence, nothing can control you anymore. Not fear, not your past, not their opinions, not even your own doubts. You become untouchable, not because you built walls, but because you stopped needing to be understood to feel whole. And that changes everything. Because most people aren't looking for peace, they're looking for a version of peace that comes without discomfort. They want stillness without facing their own noise. They want acceptance without letting go of their need to be validated. But that's not how this works. Real peace doesn't show up as comfort. It shows up as clarity. It comes in the silence after you've let go of everything that was never yours to carry. It arrives when you stop negotiating with the past, when you stop dragging around expectations that were never rooted in reality. Think about how much of your suffering has come from this. Wishing things had gone differently, hoping someone had treated you better, wanting closure that never came. None of that pain is about the moment, it's about the resistance. It's about you trying to rewrite a chapter that's already printed. But once you accept it, really accept it, the power of those moments starts to fade. They become memories, not anchors. And in that release, something unexpected happens. You make room for something new, a new version of you, one who doesn't chase chaos just to feel alive, one who doesn't grip every moment, trying to bend it into something prettier, one who knows that healing isn't about fixing what's broken. It's about remembering who you were before you started doubting your own voice. You're not here to be perfect. You're here to be whole. You're here to stop performing and start existing. To stop editing your personality to make others comfortable. To stop betraying your own boundaries just to keep temporary peace. Because here's the truth. Control is an illusion. The more you chase it, the more life slips through your hands. But the moment you release it, when you stop needing every piece to fit, you begin to move from peace, not panic. You're no longer trying to avoid discomfort. You're learning to sit with it, to breathe through it, to find calm in the eye of the storm, not by controlling the weather, but by becoming the sky. And from that space, detached but not cold, clear but not cruel, you make better decisions. Not from urgency, not from fear, but from alignment. That kind of presence, it's powerful. You become the person people can't shake because you're not operating from insecurity anymore. You're not playing a part. You're not trying to be liked. You're just being fully, deeply, authentically. And it confuses people because they're used to others over-explaining. They're used to emotional performances. They're used to people shrinking. But when you stand tall in your truth and you do it quietly, something shifts. The wrong people disappear. The right ones appear. And you stop needing to chase either. You're finally free. And freedom? It's not about doing whatever you want. It's not rebellion. It's not chaos. It's the absence of need. It's the peace that comes from no longer needing anything to be different in order for you to feel whole. That's why rooted people scare unstable systems. Because you can't sell urgency to someone who isn't desperate. You can't manipulate someone who isn't seeking external validation. You can't trigger someone who's made peace with their past. This is the kind of quiet strength that changes lives. And here's the kicker. It's not something you earn. It's something you return to. It's who you were before the world told you to be someone else. It's who you were before fear taught you to perform, before rejection made you shrink, before conditioning made you think you had to beg for love, for success, for worth, but you don't. You were never too much. You were never too emotional. You were never too intense. You were just surrounded by people who couldn't handle your light because they hadn't faced their own darkness. Now you know better. Now you protect your energy. Now you stop showing up where you're only tolerated. Now you stop waiting for someone to give you permission to be yourself. You already have it. This isn't about becoming a new person. It's about shedding what was never yours. It's about unlearning the noise, releasing the weight, standing in your truth, no apology, no explanation. And in that stillness, in that radical self-acceptance, you discover something the world can't teach you. Peace is not found in safety. It's found in sovereignty. You no longer need to chase love. You no longer beg for closure. You no longer let other people's confusion define your clarity. You know who you are. You know what you bring. And you know that anyone who needs you to shrink in order to stay was never meant to walk with you in the first place. So you walk away. Without resentment, without drama, without looking back. You walk away because your peace is too important. And if someone ever makes you choose between them and your peace, always choose your peace. Because when you do, the right ones, the real ones, will never ask you to make that choice in the first place. There's a strange kind of magnetism in someone who doesn't need to explain themselves. You can feel it. They don't walk into a room seeking permission. They're not adjusting their tone to be less intimidating or shrinking their truth to avoid discomfort. They've done the work. Faced the silence. sat with the shadows, and now they've made peace with all the parts of themselves, the loud, the soft, the wounded, the wild. And that kind of wholeness can't be faked. It's not loud. It doesn't scream for attention, but it's unmistakably there. Because when you stop performing, you don't disappear. You become real. And real is rare. Most people never get to that place. They're too caught up in the noise, too addicted to being seen, too afraid of what will happen if they stop explaining, apologizing, adjusting. But you've realized something powerful. You're not responsible for how others receive your truth. You're only responsible for telling it. That's the shift. When you stop living to be understood and start living to be true. When your life becomes an expression, not a performance. When your boundaries are no longer defenses, they're declarations of self-respect. And here's the truth. People will misunderstand you, even the kind ones, even the ones who love you, because they're interpreting you through the lens of their fears, their conditioning, their unmet needs. But that's not your problem to fix. Your job is not to manage someone else's perception. It's to stay aligned with your own truth, to keep your peace steady, even when the world around you is spinning. That's where real freedom is born. You're no longer shaped by external turbulence. You're anchored in internal stillness. And that's a threat to systems, relationships, and identities that rely on your self-doubt. You become the glitch in the matrix, the one who doesn't flinch, the one who doesn't play the game. Because once you've stopped seeking validation, the game loses its power. You don't get pulled into drama. You don't need to convince anyone of your worth. You're not building a brand. You're living a truth. That scares people, especially those who've never seen it before, especially those who benefit from your compliance. But here's the beautiful part. The more you live from that space, the more people like you begin to appear. Not because you chase them, but because you became the kind of person your soul was looking for all along. Rooted, quietly powerful, whole. This is where life begins to change. Not because it gets easier, but because your perspective does. You no longer measure your growth by how much you control. You measure it by how much peace you maintain in the face of what you can't. You don't need everything to go your way to feel okay. You don't need every ending to be clean, every word to be understood, every wound to be witnessed. You simply allow it all to be what it is. And from that acceptance, you create a different kind of life. Not one that's perfect, but one that's deeply honest. One where your no is firm, where your yes is sacred, where your energy isn't up for negotiation. You start to recognize the cost of explaining yourself, of watering down your truth just to keep the peace, of betraying your intuition just to be included, and you stop paying that price. Because you finally understand, if peace costs you your truth, it's not peace, it's performance. And you didn't come here to perform. You came here to remember your power, your clarity, your right to exist without justification. You came here to live with integrity, to show up fully, even when it's uncomfortable, to love deeply but not desperately, to let go without guilt, to speak without rehearsing, to walk away when something stops being aligned, and to never look back with shame. You came here to be free, not reckless, not avoidant, free. Free from conditioning, free from apology, free from the weight of being someone you're not just to keep others comfortable. And the irony is, the moment you stop fighting for the version of yourself the world prefers, you unlock the life that was always meant for you. One rooted in truth, one led by intuition, one shaped not by what others expect, but by what you know to be real. This is where everything changes. You stop asking the world to validate your existence. You stop explaining your softness. You stop defending your boundaries. You stop waiting for permission to be who you are. You realize peace isn't earned. It's claimed. In silence, in stillness, in the quiet certainty that your truth is enough. And so, when the world demands a performance, you respond with presence. When it asks you to prove yourself, you say nothing at all. Because the most powerful thing you can do is simply exist as yourself, fully. No filter, no rehearsal, no need to explain. Because when you finally stop explaining yourself, you don't become less seen, you become undeniable. So, if you've ever felt like you were too much, too sensitive, too deep, know this: you were never too much. They were simply not ready. And that's not your burden to carry. It's your gift to protect. So, stop apologizing. Stop shrinking. Stop waiting for the world to get it. Just live it. And trust that your truth, the unpolished, raw, radiant truth, will call in exactly who and what is meant for you. And if this message stirred something real inside you, let it land. Let it reshape you. And don't just keep scrolling. Drop a comment below. Let me know what part hit home the hardest. Like this video if it brought you clarity. And if you're ready to live this truth, not just hear it, subscribe. Because here we don't do surface, we do real. We do raw. We do the kind of truth that doesn't beg to be understood. It simply stands. This is your reminder. You don't need to explain your evolution. You just need to live it.